So what's next? We guess we'll go into reviews, huh? So this is my favorite part of the stream. I know we're here so soon. Alternate ending if you said no. Oh my goodness. I'm really curious too. But I mean, I'm sure you can find that on YouTube somewhere. We're not going to go ahead and do the dungeon again just to... or not to do the boss fight again just to look at the alternate ending. That's okay. Although that final boss wasn't actually that tough. I think Lassic was actually a bit tougher. But anyway, so I guess we'll just go into... I'll do as much of the review as I can. If I have to step away for a moment, I will let you know. Anyway, well, this game was pretty short. We managed to beat it in about... I think there's about 20 hours or so. Yeah, it's pretty short. So we are... So, yeah, I mean... Anyway, so normally when I do a review, I try to do it into 4 aspects. We do it into... we do story... Because we mostly do RPGs. It's going to be story, graphics, sound, and gameplay. And then I just do a little summary about like whether or not who I recommend to, or whether I recommend the game at all. So, anyway, I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. So... And also, remember this review is going to take into account that this game is from 1987. The 1988 is actually the Western release date, but the game actually came out in 1987. Of course, it was in development before then, too. So we will definitely be taking the fact that this game is really, really early, really, really old, too, because it's more than 30 years old, so we have to take into account the games or the technology back then. So I will obviously not be grading it against stuff from 2019 or something like that, or from this century. Anyway, so let's go ahead and begin. So let's see, with story, I mean, look, it's from 1987. The story is actually quite simple. It's very simply the adventure of a girl, Alice, or Alyssa, her full name, her real full name, trying to avenge her brother against Lassic, who was trying to rule the alcohol system with an iron fist, I suppose. We basically went on an adventure, and we ran around and helped beat up some things, and eventually get all the items we needed, and we were able to ascend to the castle and defeat Lassic and avenge her brother. And then we had to defeat Dark Falls, who tried to take over the world. I wonder where Dark Falls comes from, actually. It's not really explained, and maybe it will be explained in future games, but for now, that is pretty much it. So yeah, the story is really simple. I mean, there's not much story. This isn't from the game from 1987, so the story is very, very simple, and it's good enough to get you going through the game, and you just that's pretty much it. I don't really have much to say. It is a shame that you don't. Although there are NPCs, and that's pretty cool that they have quite a bit of NPCs, but like there's no real party interaction, so you kind of forget how everyone sound. Like they really don't characterize their personalities. That's just kind of a shame. And I mean, this is before... Unfortunately, this is an era where before we were characterizing our protagonists. So that won't be... So they didn't really put... Like, because unlike Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, which would come a little, like, about 2 years later, to be fair, but in Dragon Quest, you could name your protagonist, and you kind of, like, like, I'm comparing it against another game that's very similar. So Dragon Quest came out the year before, so they characterized the protagonist through like the quests, and then you had to do certain things, and of course they're like, oh, brave hero, blah blah blah. And I mean, like, there's not too much characterization, but at least the NPCs talk to you like you're a hero, or like they remember what you did, kinda. The basic level. But in this game they kinda didn't funny thing, they didn't like mention like, so you're a girl rocking around with a big dude, a magician, and a cat, and they didn't make any observation of the party, and it's unfortunate too, so you don't really get any characterization of the party members. I think this is more addressed in the PS2 remake, but of course I can't talk about that. I have not actually played it, and I am not going to. And like, I only can tell you based on what I saw a little bit of it. And the other thing is that, yeah, they didn't do too much about it, so you don't really get a chance to get to know your characters, unfortunately. So that's the only thing I'm kind of a little bit disappointed about. But I mean, I have to also take into account that because memory was a huge issue back in the this is an 8-bit system, so this is about the same generation as the original Nintendo NES, or in Japan it's called the Famicom. So they had a lot of limited memory, so they couldn't fit in that much text. I mean, these things are like your smartphone runs circles around those things. Think about that. Like, this was running on a system that is like weaker than anything else. Even our old phones are better than the system that these were running on. So that's just how little memory they had. So I completely understand that it's probably a technology a limitation. So there isn't too much to say about the story. It's simple enough, gets the job done. Not gonna be one of like things. It's very simple, but at least it's fine, I guess. Just a few little disappointments. Alright, so we're gonna talk about the graphics. So obviously we have to take into account that these are the 80s, but honestly, it's actually quite good. I'm like, for this time period, it looks really, really nice. And even now, like, it doesn't look that bad. Like, a lot of times you would assume that it would, like, back then we had like, it was Dragon Quest and Super Mario Brothers, and it was like really different, like 1985. But like, these actually had quite a lot. There's actually quite a lot of artistry, and you could tell that too. And so they're like, the sprites are actually quite big, and they even have like NPC sprites that are like pretty big. The color palette is limited, of course, but because it's an 8-bit system. But it actually looks closer to. Like, it looks more advanced than I thought it was going to be, and I'm actually really impressed. And the most important thing is that they did a lot of work to get those dungeons. Like, the dungeons, like, you guys might think, like, oh, it's just a brick. I know, we were joking that all the dungeons are brick wall dungeons, but to create that level of sophisticated 3D dungeon was unheard of. This game is, like, before we had 3D systems. So it's amazing. It's a technical marvel that they were able to map out like these sprites to make it look like a dungeon. And of course, it's not perfect. Like, sometimes like you walk over and you assume the door doesn't show up organically, and it's because it's a limitation. But they were able to cram all the dungeon sprites into this card, and it's crazy. So there was like a lot of technical wizardry that they had to do, and they actually had to like take snapshots of like mazes in movement to do it. And if you look up the information about how it was developed, it's really crazy what they had to do just to fit it into this this game. So for graphically, it's actually really, really good for this time. And I think personally that it looks even more advanced than like Dragon Quest, and then later even Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy looks really nice too, but like, this game is really, really good looking for an RPG on the 8-bit Master System. And so, yeah, I'm like really impressed. And it still looks pretty nice today. It's not like, it's sort of super pixely, but like, at least it still looks presentable. And I know I mean, that's for me personally, because I'm also quite used to these pixel style, and like, it's kind of evokes the style of, like, Shovel Knight is a new game that looks kind of like this too, with more colors, of course. But it's actually really, really cool, and like, so it's a real testament to the technological marvel that this game is. And I mentioned it a couple of times while we were playing. So yeah, very good graphics for 1987 for sure. You're a Shovel Knight. Hi, Techscape. You're here for the review. We beat the game. I know. We actually beat the game in a reasonable time. Anyway, what was I gonna say again? Okay, so that pretty much covers graphics. It's great. It's great for the time. And yeah, thank you for joining Techscape. So I really had a good time with like the. What am I blanking on? Oh yeah. So I really enjoyed the graphics, and I'm actually really impressed about how it looks even today. And even like They even had to draw out a space travel. That's actually really cool too. Anyway, what else are we gonna say? So I think I've harped enough about how the graphics are a technological marvel for this time. Let's go ahead and go to the sound. I don't know how I feel about the soundtrack. Like, some parts are really cool. Like I don't know if it's my favorite soundtrack of 8-bit RPGs. There's definitely, I mean, Final Fantasy, even with, and okay, so one interesting thing is, like, we're gonna cover the game because the review is going to be based on the FM sound. If you chose to play the original version of this game, you would not hear this cool, neat FM sound synthesizer. You would hear, like, they call it the PSG, but it's basically the sound without an add-on, and it sounds quite a bit different. I actually posted on Discord about the comparison between, like, the themes. The PSG sounds more 8-bit, I suppose, quote unquote. Like, they say it sounds more like how the Famicom NES sounded like. And whereas if the FM sound chip, this is more similar to what the 16-bit Mega Drive would sound like in the future. So I personally like this sound more, but that's a very subjective. But that's neither here nor there. But I'll say that, like, the music is, like, the title screen I will always remember. And, like, the travel themes are pretty cool. I will say the dungeons are, they're okay. And I feel like the boss themes don't quite have the same punch. I think I don't know if this quite makes it to Nobuo. This is very subjective. But, like, even with the FM sound, I don't know if I would say this is a memorable soundtrack. I mean, like, some of it's memorable. Like, the dungeon theme, like, and this theme. Anyway, so, I guess that's... But, I mean, there's not too many... The only thing is, like, there's also not too much music, which is unfortunate. I feel like later on, like, Dragon Quest and FF1 had more, and they were Famicom games, so I'm kind of comparing against that. There's not a whole lot of music in the game, unfortunately. It is nice. It's good enough. I think the only one... And, like, there's that cool creepy music at the final dungeon. The boss themes are actually okay too. There's only really 2 boss themes, one for Lassic and one for Dark Falls. And the Dark Falls one is definitely better than the Lassic one. The Lassic one is too upbeat, as you were saying. Yeah, I know. I kind of feel it it wrecks the mood. So I'm really not sure how to feel about it. But otherwise, the rest of it is pretty okay. The sound effects are cool, I guess. They're nothing too... They get the job done. I think some people say the PSG version is better, but I don't play enough of it to know how every monster sounds like, and I'm not really probably going to do that. But it's like they serve their purpose, and then of course they're limited by the technology of the time. But it sounds good enough. It makes it sound like you're getting hit like so it works out. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for sound. I don't really have a lot to say because there's not too much to discuss. So I also did want to... Okay, let's go ahead and move to gameplay. So the interesting thing about this game is that it's a party system, but all the battles are done in first person. I don't know if it is unfortunate because you can't see your characters on the screen, so you only see your characters on the field, and that's actually quite interesting because I don't believe Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy 1 did that. So it's kind of neat that you could see the sprites. I know this is more into graphics, I'm kind of mixing them up. The battle system is quite simple, of course, because it's one of the first games to do this kind of first-person dungeon crawling. I mean, for a Japanese RPG, I suppose. They've definitely did this kind of... There's definitely been first-person games before this on the older PCs, as far as I know. But, like, it's kind of neat to see it in a Japanese RPG for the first time. And you'll see more of it in other series, like Shin Megami Tensei, which is from Atlas. And unfortunately, you won't see in Phantasy Star 2, where they changed it to be more of a third-person view. But it's kind of neat that... So the game's battle system is really simple. You have magic and you have attack, and you just gain EXP, and that's cool. So it's very, very simple, and like you level up fairly easily. So not fairly easily, but sorry. And also, oh yeah, guys, I may have to, before I continue this review, I think I might have to step away for a moment. I will be out for about 20 minutes or so, so I will take care of something, and I'll be back.